One question I often hear whenever we're meeting with, potential clients is, we've been through several companies before, why do companies no longer clean well? What makes you different than the rest, right? And so, I think this is a three-part answer, right? So the simple answer really is private equity and large corporations have been consolidating the industry. And so because of that, most of the final decisions are being made by procurement departments, and they're all following some type of spreadsheet that's designed by McKinsey or some consulting firm that really focuses on the lower overall cost or the lowest cost per hour, right? So I think in response to this, decision-making matrix, most national or larger sophisticated companies have tailored their RFPs or their response to these RFPs accordingly, right? So if the evaluation criteria is lowest cost per hour and lowest overall cost, then you can really do two things as a service provider, right? Is you can reduce or no longer provide training, right? You reduce your supervision as much as possible. You reduce inspections or anything that is not direct labor, because these spreadsheets, and I've seen many of them, they're never going to tell you this, but I've seen many of them and I've reverse engineered a good chunk of them. So I can tell you that they're really just looking at the on-site hours, right? So you might spend 80 hours on site with your supervision all in, but if your direct labor that's on site Monday through Friday is 60 hours, they're only counting your 60 hours, right? So again, in response to this, you have to reduce that supervision. You have to reduce that training. And then the other thing is you can't provide expensive equipment. So for example, if you are going to use a $30,000 ride-on auto scrubber that's going to help you reduce labor hours, then you're actually shooting yourself in the foot. So in other words, these procurement departments are making it so that instead of focusing on providing efficiencies and providing high quality, you're actually rewarded for doing the opposite, right? Because in their decision matrix, they're not counting how much equipment, they're not counting your training, they're not counting your supervision. That's, I guess, the short answer to why most companies aren't cleaning well anymore, right? I say this because, when I'm talking to potential prospects or facility managers, I do like to explain this information to them so that when we submit our bid, we tell them like, hey, we're going to use this piece of equipment. We're going to, this is what our training program looks like. This is how much supervision we're going to provide. So just make sure that when this goes to procurement, they're actually factoring in all those hours. In a nutshell, let me give you an example. We were just in New Jersey for a national bid for a large distribution center. And one thing that we observed during the walkthrough is that there was two cleaners using push brooms. They could have had a ride-on sweeper and perform the work with only one person. It would be faster, it'd be better, and it would be cheaper, right? But this is a picture-perfect example of someone that won the bid, because they provided more labor hours at a lower cost per hour, but it obviously ends up costing you more with lower quality. But again, this is the things that we're seeing more and more.